It's just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Scott Brookshire. Thank you so much for coming by. I've been a big fan of your posts on Dental Town for, God, a decade. How long have you been in town?
When did it start?
It started at, actually, it's the 20-year anniversary is this St. Patrick's Day. It started on St. Patrick's Day, which is March 17th, 1999.
I'm going to say about 17 years then. I first heard about you, it was in San Francisco, it was at a DenMat sales / continuing ed, and the first half of it was you talking about 30-day MBA. That's how I found out about the tapes, then started getting the Dental Town magazine, got online, and from then on, I've been a regular townie.
That was with Bob Ibsen's DenMat.
Yes, it was.
And he was the proud initial only supporter of Dental Town. When we started our magazine and website, everybody said, well, you're going to need, we'll see how it turns out in a year or two. I'm like, okay, this thing costs $90,000 a month to run. I don't have a year or two. And I pled my cases, and all the companies were marketing directors, and they all needed data, and they said, well, But Bob Ibsen was a dentist, and he just loved the whole concept. And so we came out of the magazine, Bob Ibsen, who we did a podcast on. He's no longer, we have several that have passed on. Bob Ibsen podcast passed on, one of the best podcasts ever. Carl Nish had 4 pass on. But he bought the inside cover, the back cover, and the inside back cover. And I said, well, how long do you do this? He goes, I'll do it till you break even. What an amazing man.
That's special.
He was an amazing guy.
He opened the door for you.
But when you said that you met me in San Francisco, I thought it was going to be.
Well, I didn't want to talk about the bar afterwards.
Are you sure it wasn't that Chippendale's gay bar? I was dancing down the street.
No.
That's how I put myself in dental school.
Although looking at you, I can see how you can make that.
Yeah. So let me read your bio. Dr. Scott Brookshire is raising a family and practicing in one of North America's most beautiful places, the Tongass National Forest of Southeast Alaska. Nestled amongst the fjords and misty coastline of Prince of Wales Island is a small fishing community of Craig. Dr. Brookshire has had to finally hone the art of running a small town practice with an island-wide population of only 5,559. There is no room for error. Most everyone is related, so small things can become big problems. By knowing your customer and have a relation-based philosophy, great things are possible. When not cutting teeth, Dr. Brookshire enjoys stream fishing and many salmon rivers or hunting deer in the rainforest. Okay, I got a lot of things to say before I want to start talking. That is, number one, the Alaskan cruise is the greatest cruise in the world. People don't realize that Alaska snakes halfway down Canada, halfway to the state of Washington, and it's a tropical rainforest.
Well, I think they call it a temperate rainforest, but it's definitely a rainforest.
Okay, a rainforest.
Yeah.
A temperate rainforest.
We will get about 140 inches a year.
Oh my God!
It rarely rains hard. It's a constant, steady drizzle, and then you'll get a couple hours of sunlight, and then you'll get 7 days of a constant, regular drizzle. And that is the norm.
So beautiful.
It's green and lush and gorgeous.
So I have 4 boys, and the first time I did the Alaska cruise, they were about, I don't know, 4, 6, 8, 9, something like that. And I forgot how old they were. Well, maybe 6, 8, 10, and 12. But anyway, Motorola just came out with their walkie-talkies. So I thought, well, I'm going to hang out on the beach, by the pool, the bar, and I'll just let my boys run wild, but I'll have them on walkie-talkies.
Sure.
And it was the most fun cruise they ever did. So for 7 days, the cruise ship was 14 floors, and they were just running the whole ship wild, and it was so gorgeous. And a lot of those towns that you pulled into, there was no road from that town to connect to Anchorage or Seattle.
No.
That was it, and you had an airport, and you're on an island.
Yeah. So what you just described is Ketchikan. So Ketchikan is a population of maybe 12,000. 13,000. It has a road that goes maybe 9 miles north and 7 miles south, and that's it. And that's the big city for us. We get in a boat and travel. If you're in Ketchikan, you travel 3 hours west, and you hit Prince of Wales Island, that we call POW, and that has the population. The bio said 55,500. Actually, that's probably the census during the summer. when you have a lot of workers that come there. I'd say year-round regular residents is about 3,500. So
So are you the only dentist there?
I'm the only for-profit dentist there. There is a native health clinic there that is also a community health center, kind of a melding of the two. And so there is some competition, but their focus is different than mine. So there's absolutely competition, but I think we're going after a different demographic. And
Now, when did the United States buy Alaska?
it was Seward's Folly. He was, I think, the Secretary of the Interior during the Lincoln administration. So it was post-Civil War. I'm gonna guess 1868.
1868?
Yeah.
And there were a lot of Russians living on Alaska.
Yes. Yeah.
Who didn't really like their country. So I remember the first time I went, my dad and my brother Paul, we went up, we flew into Anchorage, went down to Kenai, went salmon fishing, went down to Homer, went halibut fishing. And we stopped at this one town as tourists, and there was a Russian village.
Yeah, was it Nikiski by any chance?
I don't know, but they certainly didn't like tourists from the lower 48.
Yes.
How could you say that more knowledgeable? I mean, because if I say it, they might think, well, Howard, maybe you, your dad, and your brother are a bunch of assholes, but they did not.
So I've never been in Nikiski, so I don't know all the story for that community. But a lot of your tourists, particularly from the cruise ships, are there for 6 hours, 8 hours. They come in. They stand in the middle of the road because they see an eagle that they want to take a picture of. Imagine you're in a town of 4,000. 2 cruise ships come in, and the population of the town just more than doubled.
Or tripled.
Yes, and so it just doubled in terms of the guests but then you add the crew, and it's suffocating. Now the community I live in, we don't have that issue. It's too small of a community for cruise ships to want to come there. But Ketchikan, Sitka, Hoona, some of these smaller communities in the Inside Passage deal with that a lot. And it's there's a plus and a negative. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of economic activity that occurs. These communities, by and large, really rely on the wallets of these individuals that are coming to see Alaska. And they very much want to show off what their community has to offer.
But I guess I started thinking about that when you said that there's another dentist works on the native.
Yeah.
And the Native American Indians actually came across that Bering Strait.
Yep.
So they were before they were Native American Indians, they were Russians.
Yes, they've been there a long time.
Yeah, and but I did sense that the Russians really. I mean I imagine if you were an American and we sold to Germany, the next thing you know that everything's done in Germany, and I listened to them telling me their view on the deal.
Yeah.
They really felt like they were
if
sold down a river.
Yeah, if you're referring to like the Native Americans, what they refer to as Alaska Native people, they absolutely have a legitimate gripe and legitimate resentment. So you have Russia sells to the U.S. The U.S. comes in. They start these Indian schools to quote, modernize and civilize the natives. And so they go into these villages that might have a population of 90 to 200. Everybody's related. Everybody knows everybody. They take the kids and they take them to, the other side of the world, essentially, 200 miles away, 800 miles away, to an Indian school, beat them if they speak their native language, educate them in, I'll say American ways, and then let them go back to their community. And that happened for, I'm guessing, about 3 or 4 generations. So you now have people who don't speak their language, or very few people do. Some of the elderly will. They speak English, but they have a very legitimate resentment that their culture was ripped away from them, was beaten out of them. That's how a lot of them see it. That doesn't mean they necessarily hate all white people, but if you look historically, they have a legitimate beef. There's just no way around it.
Well, it's to me, it's the same deal. I mean, somebody in Washington, D.C. knows that they're smarter than somebody on your small, insignificant island. And I mean, why do people fall for this trap since the beginning of time? I mean, Ronald Reagan, what do you say? Government is not the solution. Government is the problem.
Yeah.
It's like the government will come to an industry, regulate it, tax it, break it all up till you can't even afford it, and then say, well, you better give me more tax money and then I'll help you pay for it.
The problem was we didn't tax you enough. If
Yeah,
you only taxed you more,
it's
things would
like
be
they
better.
come at you with a baseball bat, they break both of your knees, then they tell you you need them to help you. You know,
Here's
so
a wheelchair.
and
Aren't you
we
lucky
see
we're
so many,
around?
and how many of those native communities now are still believe in big government after big government has been
Well,
their worst nightmare for 50 years,
I'm
and they still have faith in the government.
I'm politically active and I'm more conservative, so I'm coming at this from a biased perspective, but I do think that your average native community is far more leans democratic, social safety net, high taxes, that type of thing.
So on your island, it really doesn't matter if you're part of Alaska or Canada or state of Washington. I mean, you're on an island.
Well, yeah.
So that island, there's basically how many people and how many?
I'm going to say 3,500 year round.
So 3,500 people year round, and you're the only fee-for-service private dentist.
There's a total of 3 dentists, 2 at the Native Health Clinic and myself.
Okay. And on the, is insurance a big, of those 3,500 people, how many of those have like third-party dental insurance?
I'd say about 20% are cash. About 40% are Medicaid. And the rest have some sort of insurance. They work for the Forest Service, police officers, teachers, that sort of thing.
So 20% cash, 40% Medicaid, and 40% private insurance?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. And I've only practiced on Prince of Wales Island, so on Dentaltown, a lot of people will complain, bitch and moan about Delta Dental and PPOs and how little they pay for services such as crowns. And I've read on Dentaltown, $600 a crown. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
6, 7. Medicaid in Alaska pays $830.
Right. So let's address a couple of concerns that you said. So when you say Delta Dental, I mean, how many Delta Dentals are there? I mean, let me just Google it.
40, 50?
No, not that many. How many Delta Dentals are in the United States? There's 39. The Delta Dental
Plans Association
Okay,
is
Google.
composed of 39 independent Delta Dental member companies operating in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. These member companies provide coverage to 68 million people.
Okay, so basically, when you say McDonald's, within a country, like McDonald's, everyone is the same United States, 12 pay, special sauce, cheese, lasagna, sausage bun. Obviously, if you read Pulp Fiction, when you go to India, they're Hindus, so they don't have Big Macs there. In fact, what was so cute to me is, when I was little in Kansas, if you were the bad boy in high school, you'd sneak out and get a case of beer and maybe a bottle of Jack Daniels. And the dentists were giggling with me because when we were at McDonald's, they showed me that when you're bad in New Delhi, you sneak out and you go eat a fish sandwich. Because you're eating something with a face. And the real rebels were eating fish sandwiches at McDonald's. And but Delta Dental's not like that. There's 39 different Delta Dentals. And Delta Dental's anything from you'd be out of your flipping mind not to think it was amazing, to it can be a really bad deal, and of course it turns into supply and demand. But you're getting $830. Delta gave me $1,000 for a crown 30 years ago, and 30 years later I get $650. So the trend line's down. But that's the same thing with the DVD player. I mean,
Cell phones.
my first DVD player was $800 and it sucked. Now they're $35 and they're perfect. So everything gets better, faster, higher quality, lower price, and healthcare they don't want to play by that game. They say, I want my iPhone. I want Intel every 2 years to come out with a processor that has twice as many chips on half the size. But I'm in healthcare. I'm in government. So I just want to raise my prices or raise my taxes, and it's not reality.
I'm not going to argue with that at all. The point I was trying to make was On Dentaltown, there's complaints about the amount that PPOs pay, and in Alaska, Medicaid pays considerably more than a lot of PPOs.
Well, okay, and so back to the PPO still, so now let's, so are you a member of the Alaska Dental Association?
Yes, after 20 years of not being a member of the
Yeah.
ADA, I finally decided to drink the Kool-Aid and try and improve it from within.
Does Delta have in Alaska? Is there Delta Dental of Alaska?
There is. It's managed, I believe, by Delta Dental of Oregon, and it
Right.
mostly deals with Alaska state employees, and I believe Alaska state employees retired.
But my point is being this, so you go to like the CDA meeting, and they have it every year in Anaheim and San Francisco.
Yeah, I went to it, took my staff last year.
And here's Delta Dental of just California, knocking out $1 billion of dental insurance every year.
Mhm.
You can't find one dumbass dentist in California that even knows the name of the Delta Dental director. And then you look at their speakers list, and they're never asked to speak, they're never asked to do anything. And then they hire speakers on there that, like Bill Dickerson, who goes there and teaches a course, Delta or the devil. It's like, are you guys so dysfunctional? It reminds me of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, or the Saudi Arabia-Yemen issue, or the Cyprus. I mean, until you can sit down and communicate. And so these PPOs, in some of these more healthy environments, like the dental insurance will say, hey, we're calling on this company, this manufacturing plant. They got 400 people, and there's only 9 dentists in that city. We're going to go meet with this guys. You think maybe a couple of you dentists could come along and talk?
And they say no.
Yeah, they're like, screw yeah. And it's like, and then the insurance is a fixed actuarial risk analysis versus a moral hazard, cheating and stealing, and say cover this much, and they're just like, well, why don't they cover 100% of the crown? Hey, dumbass, why don't you have your patient pay 100% of the crown? It's never the dentist's fault. It's the patient's fault. It's the insurance. But if you live in a state, can I tell you my first Delta Dental story?
No?
So my dad had 9 Sonic drive-ins, and in our same church was the founder of Pizza Hut, Dan and Beverly Carney, and Beverly just passed away, and I opened up right next to a Pizza Hut in Phoenix, and but anyway, long story short, my dad, I got out of dental school. You and I both had the same story where we opened up dental school.
Fresh out of school.
Yeah, I graduated May 7th and had mine open September 11th. September 21st.
Okay.
How about you?
I graduated late because I cut my finger wide open, was in a cast for a good 4 months. I think I finally got out, finished my clinical requirements early October, and saw my first patient December 16th or December 17th.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
jumped in a F-150 and just drove north.
So now the millennials are like, well, I think I'll just get a job at a DSO because that'll be great. And it's like, okay, it's really great. And everybody in the class last year, and the year before, and the year before, they all quit it within a year. And you find someone working at a DSO after 5 years, they've already worked at 5 different ones.
Yeah.
So they have to just keep jumping into, kind of like that Nintendo game where you jump in the hot lava until they finally realize that they got to open up their own. But old school boys, we just did it day one. Millennials have to dance around for 5 years.
So when you and I were in dental school and got out, you either worked for a private practice. There wasn't DSOs didn't exist by and large.
Yeah.
You had a couple in California. They had Beecham, Dr. Beecham or something. They had bad reps. I grew up always, as a kid, always had my own business. I raised mice and sold them to pet shops. I was a paper
Raised
boy.
what?
Mice.
Mice?
And I made good money at it, yeah.
Raised
We
mice.
raised mice as pets or to feed to snakes and sold them to pet shops. And so for a 15-year-old kid back in 82 to have $100 in your pocket every 10 days or so was a big deal. But the point is, I had my own business of one kind or another from about age 11 until I got out of college. And to work for somebody else was just something that I thought I'd have trouble doing. And I had one job where I was an actual employee. I was, I don't know how to describe it, I was kennel piss boy at the Puppyland Pet Motel. So the only hourly job I had was just spraying the manure off of concrete floors, and that was the only. And my boss, she was kind of crazy. She was, a pain, and so I could be my own boss, or I could have a boss. And so just innately knowing who I am, I knew that trying to get my own show and making it into what I wanted was going to make me a happier individual. That's why I took the risk and just jumped in to taking the keys from a defunct kind of failed practice in the middle of nowhere. Because it was an opportunity, and the absolute worst thing that could happen is that I failed. And I'd get back in my truck and I'd head south. So what do you have to lose? I wasn't married, I had debt, but I was a dentist, so I'm going to figure out a way to pay for it. And so you take the risk and you go for it.
So when the seller sold it to you, how long was the transition period?
Okay.
Did you just take the money and fly out of town?
I actually got into the practice for no money down. So the story's kind of odd. As I described earlier, I was in a cast senior year at dental school, part of the senior year, graduated late. The first year ortho students just started. I met up with a guy who was just started ortho, was looking to sell his practice in Alaska. Long story short, he saw me as an opportunity. He was very aggressive in trying to sell, and I found out the reason he was so aggressive and the reason he couldn't sell it is because about 6 months prior, he was in his office drilling away, and 10 uniformed state troopers came into his office, seized all of his files, spent a week interviewing patients. Essentially, they were accusing him of rampant Medicaid fraud. And so no one wanted to touch the office, no one wanted to buy it. He ended up leaving and applying to ortho school because he figured his practice went down the tubes. And that's how I found out about the practice. I told him...
Well, Medicaid fraud, you can go to jail for that.
Absolutely, and he did.
He went to jail?
He went to jail.
For how long?
This is embarrassing. He went to jail for, I think it was 34 days. He was accused of stealing, that they know of. I think they were able to show about 60 grand, but that's because they didn't look at all of the files. And it wasn't just Medicaid, it was insurance. The federal government or the state informed the insurance companies, and they really didn't care.
No, that's not like say 60 grand. If a private insurance company thought, yeah, 60 grand, I mean, what would my attorney bill be?
Right.
What if the lawsuit? What if it turned south? They said, oh, I was innocent and you harmed my reputation, and then sued them for $1 million. And that's why people, you don't understand that the private insurance, the Deltas, the Blue Cross and Blue Shields, the Cignas, all that, those are just business associations. But when you start participating with the government, when you start taking Medicaid, Medicare, you're dealing with the FBI, the IRS. I mean, you're dealing with some bad boys who routinely... One of my very good friends, guess where he's practicing now?
Where?
Mexico.
Oh.
Mexico.
So
because his wife, he had a practice. His wife was doing the books. And let's just say that she was gorgeous, but not a really good accounting mind, attention to detail. And so she was just loose and sloppy with the code.
So what you're saying is he married her for her mind.
Yeah, he married her for her bookkeeping abilities, obviously. But anyway, by the time they got investigated, I mean, I know this woman. She obviously had no idea what's wrong. And this man loved dentistry, but didn't do any of the business stuff, none of that stuff.
That was for her to do.
So they hired, and then they got the dumbest attorney I could be aware of, because it was a friend of a friend from church.
What could go wrong?
I mean, if you're going to get an attorney, you need to ask
He's a
the
good
lady
Christian.
praying next to you at church. That's the lady that knows.
Well, then they can pray
And it
next
was
to you
her
in jail.
nephew who just graduated from law school, so awesome, he has no flipping experience, and he's not sharp. And anyway, by the time they finally started realizing, oh my God, he could go to jail for a long time. So he moved to Mexico City where you get your dental license with, I guess, a few Benjamins. And now he's an American trained dentist from America and in Mexico. So when you go down to resorts, when you're in Cabo and Puerto Vallarta and Cozumel, and you're in the nice place and you see a dentist that looks like us and talks still, they're running, everyone I met had a legal problem. I didn't meet anyone who said, you know what, I just thought I wanted to live in a country that didn't have 911 and solid electricity and no internet. They're
drug lords.
Yeah, but the drug lords are actually fine because I talked to him about that stuff. Well, when you're an American trained dentist, who has all the money?
Drug lords.
Yeah, so who do they want? Do you think they want the Mexican dentist who went to 9-month school?
They want someone who knows what he's
Or
doing.
the American who you went to Loma Linda?
Yeah.
Do you think they want the guy from Loma Linda? Or the guy from the school in Puerto?
My vote would be Loma Linda.
Yeah, so they actually have a great life. They just, But anyway, too many. So this guy, sold it to you.
Yeah, so
he went to jail for 30 days.
He went to jail for 30 days, and I was subpoenaed, so I had to be there for his sentencing. The reason I said it was embarrassing is the judge, when he did the sentencing, said, doctor, and he mentioned his last name, you're a chiseler, you're a crook, but you were stealing from well-heeled entities, insurance companies, which isn't all that bad. That's what a judge said during the sentencing of this guy who was getting nailed for Medicaid fraud. And so he gave him, I think it was 90 days, but in the state of Alaska, if you don't get into trouble while you're in the slammer, 2/3 of it gets removed. So he only did 30-some days. It was in a halfway house, so he could actually, it was a converted like Motel 6 in Anchorage. So he could run around during the day, and he had to be in his bed at like 9 o'clock at night. And then he could get out again at 8 in the morning. So it was a situation where I don't think he learned anything from it, although he's now in the lower 48 and I think he's doing pretty well. So hopefully he did change his ways. But he was a good quality dentist, but he absolutely loved money. I think it was a greed. I can figure out some way where I deserve this and this isn't really illegal because it's okay for this reason. I think that's the kind of thing he was doing.
Yeah, but so on Google, they have algorithms for search.
Sure.
Well, Israel makes some of the greatest algorithms for dental insurance. And so now that, like Delta's, there are 39 companies doing billions of dollars. They run algorithms too. So I had another friend who, he thought, well, God, Delta only pays half of a crown. So when the patient comes in, I'll charge 2 crowns, they'll pay half of 2, and then the patient won't have to give me any money, and then we're all good. That's a great
But
idea.
they'll only do 1 crown.
You'd only do 1 crown,
yeah.
but it's usually a first molar, but he always bill for the second one plan. So an algorithm picks up, okay, in Arizona, 96.5% of all the crowns are billed 1 at a time, and here's Dr. Dumbass, and half of his crowns are 2 at a time. So they go in and they do an audit, and here's what you got to realize: the claims he's mailed from Phoenix to Delta in Glendale, Arizona, those are civil, criminals, fines, whatever. But the claims that crossed a state line, now it's a federal deal. That's how they took Al Capone down.
It's mail fraud.
And it's mail fraud.
Sure.
He went to 5 years in prison for mail fraud.
Damn.
And it's just like, and what I can't say most about the dentists don't realize that they're one of the most entitled groups. They always talk about how bad and entitled people are. Dentists are the most entitled. They expect someone else to pay for all their customers' goods and services. When I bought an iPhone, paid cash.
Mm-hmm.
Bought a car, paid cash. I mean, these Americans buy houses and cars through their own private measures all day long. But when it comes down to a crown, they expect the government to pay it, the employer to pay it. Why can't you just tell the customer to pay you? Why can't you just man up and have them own it?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. You're talking about the mindset of the patient.
Yeah.
And I hear all the time, I'm sure other dentists do, I can't afford that because I don't have insurance. There's a mindset that somebody else is supposed to pay for this
But
because it's just too expensive.
But I call bullshit on that because in every zip code, what I love most about Care Credit, and I don't get any money from Care Credit or any of that stuff like that, they can tell you what every dentist is using in that area. In fact, not just dentists, they can tell you what the vets are doing, the eye doctors doing, all the surgeries, cosmetics, everything. And in every damn zip code, there's the average selling new price of a car is $33,000. And, in 2008, at a horrible year, there's only like 9 million cars sold. On a good year last year, it was like 17 million cars. But the average American will buy 13 new cars between 16 and 77. And in every zip code, there's a dentist who will sell a case that big every month his entire career, and the other 95% will never do it one time in their life because in the other offices they're saying, well, your teeth are all horrible, but your insurance, and you make the sign across, your insurance only has 1,000, and so you have 28 shitty teeth, but the shittiest tooth is this molar, so we're just gonna fix one crown, and then they'll get on downtown and bitch about the insurance companies.
Right.
And there's another guy just sit there and say, dude, this is what we gotta do. I mean, you're driving an F1 Ford pickup truck, costs you $40,000. This is what we need to do. We need to take out blah, 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 and the whole thing's gonna be, and they don't say it's gonna be $15,000 or $18,000 or $20,000. They say the whole thing's gonna cost you $280 a month for 60 months. And they go, $280 a month? That's awesome.
I can do that.
I'll do that. And they're doing it in middles of nowheres everywhere. And then the other 8 guys in the medical dental building don't believe it's even possible.
Right.
And you're like, do you not know the guy in your own building? And then they tell you, yeah, he's been there 15 years and never been to lunch with him, never been to dinner, he's never been to my house, never been to his house. I mean, in the last year, I've had 50 business owners in Ahwatukee in my house. 50. They don't want to press the flesh, they don't want to work the value chain. Back when I started my Delta Dental, when the founder of Pizza and my dad came out, and he looked at the deal, they were looking at my revenue, and that was back on a pay board. I'd opened September 21st, and this was after the first of the year in pay board, and I'll never forget Dan Carney looking at that deal, and he says, who's Delta Dental AZ? And I said, that's Delta Dental Arizona. He goes, well, that's your number one customer. They've already given me that. I think it was like $400,000 or whatever. They go, who's the CEO? I said, I don't know. He goes, dude, if some guy gave me $400,000, I'd drop on my knees and blow the son of a bitch. And my goddamn Howie doesn't even know who it is. Why don't you pick up that damn phone and buy him lunch? So I'm like, so I'm calling down there. And I told him I wanted to take him to lunch, and he said, why? And I said, because, I mean, God, you've given me more money than anybody in there. I mean, I've only been home a few months, and he thought something was weird, or whatever, because I'm a dentist.
That doesn't happen.
Because it doesn't happen. And so, anyway, so his name was Ed Judd, and I developed a relationship with him and some other Delta CEOs over the years. I like the Irish drinking one in Minnesota the most. That guy could drink me under a table and still tell better stories. And they were really sad because you would give your church religion, the ADA, $1,000 a year, and they wouldn't sell $1 worth of insurance for you.
Right.
And then I give you, say I'm Delta, and say I give you your practice $100,000 a year for 20 years. And I only get one letter from them. It's like, you terrible bastard, Delta or the devil, you son of a bitch, you didn't cover this, you should go to hell, you're ruining dentistry, you're scum of the earth. Oh, so that's real nice. Here's a guy out there selling $1 billion of insurance, and you think your best idea is to make him feel bad and hate you.
Right.
And it's perpetuated by, I mean, I have the chief economist on this podcast from the World Health Organization, all this, and I say, well, you're right in Chicago. You're at 211. That's where Delta is. We were talking about how long does dentistry last. I said, you can get in an Uber in 5 minutes. Delta has hundreds of millions of claims with all the actuarial data in the world. They can answer any question. So when some dumbass gets on downtown and says, well, composites last longer than amalgams, sure, if you were decapitated in a guillotine and you don't have a brain, But then you consider and say, these composites last 6.5 years. These amalgams, I mean, it says amalgams that has 15 to 30, but forget that. What percent of amalgams at 60, like if you do a root canal, at 60 months, 5%, 1 in 20 done by endodontists are extracted. Because see, we could debate on this root canal's failed or is there
Right. But
this
it's out of the
feel
mouth.
right, but we're talking about just the data, it's gone. And then if general dentists do it, it's 10%. But if you talk to every general dentist on dental town, what percent of your root canals
They
fail?
never fail.
Well, knock on wood. Knock on wood, I never had one fail. But when I asked them, I said, well, get down there. They go, well, I mean, they wouldn't take the phone call. I mean, I have just as good a chance getting that data. I mean, no one does. And why? Because of this 50 years of dysfunctional, hostile relation brought by the country club dentist who don't work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and expect other entities like employers and government to pay for the stuff they make because they don't want to bother their customers by having to pay for it. So, it's hard to be me because when they hire a practice management consultant, they want to hear someone say that you're perfect and everybody else is bad. And I'm the guy who says, I won't even be a practice management consultant because you're an idiot and I don't know if you're fixable.
Yeah, I hired one of those, and they had a lot to say, and none of it was that I was perfect. and I took it as a learning experience. It was Sandy Pardue, classic practice.
Nice.
And she, we were doing a lot of things kind of right. But the difference in the end result, production, collections, happy patients, between kind of right and right is, it's like the difference between good to great. It was just changing a few things slightly and a fair number of things moderately, quite a bit, and using her systems and the help with the specific individual consultants we were working with, which was Lori Weber, and it was probably I think 20% year one and 15 to 20% year two. Worked with them a little bit longer. It was supposed to be a year, but my only assistant quit 4 months into it, and finding a new assistant, attracting a hygienist, not an assistant, a hygienist, attracting a hygienist.
Lori, is that how you spell Lori Weber?
Is Lori Weber? Yeah, that is, but that's not her.
Lori Weber that works for Sandy Purdue.
Works for Sandy Purdue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And but attracting a hygienist to move essentially to the middle of nowhere from San Diego or Salt Lake City or Portland, that's tough. I managed to do it, but that was difficult. And what I decided to do was to sell the sizzle and not the steak. I talked about the benefits of small town life, knowing all your patients, relationships, all of that, and attracted 3 very good candidates and made a choice, and it was a home run. Worked out very, very
3
well.
candidates for what
For
position?
hygiene.
For hygiene.
Hygiene. From the lower 48 willing to move up.
That's hard.
It was very difficult. I either was very good at doing it for the first time with no experience, or I was damn lucky. But I just looked at it, I was trying to describe Prince of Wales Island as, Lake Wobegon in Alaska. It was community, it's knowing everybody, and I didn't lie. I mean, what I was saying was true,
Yeah.
but I didn't talk about, driving to the office and seeing drunk people staggering down the street going home because they were
And this is how deans have all these dental school and hygiene schools have really ruined rural America, because what they would do, they'd be in these small towns, they'd say, well, I'm never going to get someone to come to my town. So I'd say, okay, we'll have an essay contest at your local high school, why I'm going to be a hygienist, and then pay for their damn scholarship. So you have a deal. 2 girls would write a letter, they said, okay, I'll pay both of you to go to hygiene school, there's 5 of them in the state. And then they applied to the hygiene schools, they didn't have the grades to get accepted. Because what's more important is to get a 4.0 in trigonometry and geometry than your community not having a damn hygienist. Same thing, I go to these businesses in Arizona, in small towns up by Seligman and stuff, and you talk to business owners there, one business owner says it's a complete limit to growth is mechanical engineers. But ASU only accepts you for a mechanical engineering school if you have a 4.0 in algebra and all this shit. And whenever someone from their town applies to engineering school, they don't get accepted.
Yeah.
Because ASU, it's more important to accept the Asian kid who got a 4.0 in geometry than some hillbilly that lives in Seligman that's going to work there. I mean, if you're in Seligman, you should ask all the people you're accepting, are you going to work in Seligman? Does this school take state money? Does the state have half the people living in rural and half urban? And if your town doesn't have a hygienist who needs an engineer, why is ASU accepting you on algebra skills? Because that happened to us. The only reason we became dentists because we got A's in geometry and calculus. And how much of that geometry and calculus and trig have you used in your career? 0.0.
Yeah, zero.
When I think about how many thousands of hours I stayed in the library learning calculus, trig, and geometry, I'd like to take my number 2 pencil and go poke someone's eye out. I could have been out drinking beer.
I went to UC Santa Barbara, a total party school, and I heard the same recording of the library will close in 10 minutes. Almost every night. Because I was damn well going to make sure I went to dental school. That was my goal. I'm an oddity in the sense that I grew up in Southern California and I moved to a small town in Alaska. If the dental schools, medical schools, nursing schools aren't finding people from these small communities, the likelihood of people going to those small communities is very small.
I know.
And New Mexico, you know, all these little teeny, Kennebec, South Dakota, all these little teeny towns that are not going to have the services because nobody wants to live there unless they're from there.
I know. Like the first states that now have dental therapists, because since they won't accept dentists from the rural, oh, we need to create dental therapists, because you know a dental therapist, when she graduates, first thing she's going to do is cut down a tree, carve out a canoe, go upstream the river, live under a tree, and work on the people, and for free. I mean, it's just the story just gets dumber and dumber. You know where they go? They go to Scottsdale and work for whoever pays them the most money.
I'm laughing because the second class of dental therapists that came out of Alaska Indian Health Service, it was a class of 3. It was the first class that was actually taught in Alaska. The first class was taught in New Zealand, where the program originated. Came to Prince of Wales Island, and so I don't know how many other dentists have dealt with working not with a therapist, but in the same vicinity as a therapist. I think the argument that Indian Health Service was giving for therapists, and that is sending them to these remote communities for 2 weeks at a time, a month at a time, is a very good argument, because you're talking in the middle of the Arctic, and this is a true story. A dental team of 3 go to this little village, and the room they put them in was the best room they could find for them. It had no heat until they showed up, so it took half a day to warm up, and it had a dead fox in it that they had to scrape off the floor and throw out the window. And that was the best place that they could find. And so your average dentist isn't going to put up with that kind of garbage. They're going to do it for a month, and then they're gone. And that happens a lot. So dental therapists in rural Alaska makes sense. The dental therapist that I dealt with, whose work I saw, was, in my opinion, not ideal. I'm trying to be diplomatic. There were issues with the work, removing all the decay, contacts that would stop floss. And this was in a community, so that the Indian Health Service put them in a community that already had 2 dentists, myself and one at the Indian Health Service, and then they added the second one.
Where I want to add to your story is, if you're a Native American Indian and you speak your language, do you really want some gringo cracker in the Indian Public Health Service who doesn't speak your language giving you free dentistry? And it was Jack Dillenberg who stood there and said, you know what, they don't want guys that look like Howard. So he started doing what I'm talking about. He was the first guy who said, if you live on the Indian reservation, you apply to dental school, we're taking you. Because we'd rather send back a Navajo to the Navajo and a Hopi to the Hopi than all this other stuff. And it's so obvious, and I know Jack is I mean, I love her to death, and I mean, the people that don't see that wisdom, and the people that, I mean, it's just crazy. And it's the same thing across all these sectors. Every time I go to a town of under 10,000, their problem is they don't get the resources from the schools, the educations. And I mean, I'm not talking about they need more money. It's just like, but I think that when you're saying applying to a dental school, and they say, well, you need 2 references. Well, if one of them references is the mayor of a town that says, my town ain't got a dentist, and this is the only chance we got. Same thing with hygienists. I just think it was just sad that 2 little girls from a town of 5,000 could have got a free ride to hygiene school. The town does not have a hygienist, and it still doesn't have a hygienist because they didn't get good enough grades in their stupid algebra skills. I mean, come on. And then it's even worse now because these people, they're so worried about how they're going to rank on the U.S. News and World Report, top colleges and everything, and they game it. So they say, well, what are you looking at? Well, to Big High's got the highest SAT scores. So then you come in with this great story, they don't want to hear that. They want to make the U.S.
What's your SAT score?
Yeah, it's SAT score. And you say, well, my village doesn't have a hygienist.
That's a disservice, and if it's a private college, church-funded, whatever, that's their business. If it's a government school, if it's a state school, they should look after all people in the state. It's not just Phoenix. You know, you've got the smaller communities in the north, the little LDS communities and whatnot. Same thing in Alaska. So I think these state schools are doing a disservice.
Yeah, so basically half of America lives in 147 metros, and the other half lives in 19,008 towns. And who's everybody focused on? The half in the urban.
Yeah.
And they just don't even care about the rural. And that showed up in our last election. A lot of people who don't like the current president, it's like, well, you know, there was a lot of really upset people who didn't like the status quo. You know what I mean? They were really upset. I'm going to go back to what I think would be the hardest thing that you do. Because I was from Wichita, and my ex was from Mays, and all the families in Parsons, and all these little towns.
What size are these towns?
I mean,
back in the day?
Mays was, 2,000.
Okay,
And,
so similar.
And Colwich was maybe, 1,500. And Parsons was a big town. It was 14,000.
Okay.
But you got to realize that I went to a Catholic school in West Wichita. A third of my friends all from farms.
Yeah.
Some of them, 30, 40-minute drive out in the middle of nowhere. But as you get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're in a town, an island with 3,000, the social complexity gets very tough. Because everybody knows everybody.
Everybody's related.
Oh my God, you can't go to the store in your underwear at midnight and buy a case of beer and a cigar
without
and not have Mrs. Jones say, that's the guy doing my root canal tomorrow? How do you survive that?
Okay, you could get a new clothes dryer, and somebody you hardly know will say, hey, how's the new clothes dryer? Because they just heard about it through conversation within, so 3 days later, or you'll be, when I first moved there, so I grew up in Southern California, moved to this island, and used to the California social layer, which is thin and narrow, On Prince of Wales Island, everybody knows everybody, so I'm having people come up to me and ask me questions that they know about me. I don't even know who the hell they are. So it was very off-putting for the first 3 to 4 months until I finally kind of realized these are people that are trying to get to know me. They're not sticking their nose in my business. And now, after 25 years, it's extremely comforting to have a community with the type of depth and three-dimensional social nature, as opposed to down here, where you may know your neighbor, you may know a couple people down the block, but you don't know everybody. You don't go to the store and know the guy that's putting meat behind the counter, and because he's a patient, and you know who his son is, you know who the baseball coach is of his son. It's really a neat, and you're smiling. You lived it.
Well,
it's wonderful.
It's a trade-off, because like when you live in Phoenix, you can be invisible. I mean, when people say
you are not invisible.
If you could pick a superpower, what would it be? A lot of people say, I pick invisible. Dude, if you live in a town of 1 million years, you can be invisible.
Yes.
I can drive around in Phoenix for 3 days and not run into anybody I know. But, so that's a social, lazy, You don't have to be very socially adept to survive in Phoenix, or
Not at all. Not at all.
And I look at some of the greatest companies in the world were started in your environment. I remember like Sam Walton. I mean, he invented the return policy. And it was because they were in Bentonville. They only had 5,000 people. And Helen went to church, and the lady said, "I bought these shoes from her husband. The heel fell off the next day." And Helen said, "Sam, are you going to take those back?" He goes, "That ain't my responsibility." And she goes, "Well, it is now, because this man has 5,000, and that whole family's never going to go back to your store."
Yeah.
So he was the one. And then when he took it back, he was so mad. Then the guy that came to sell him his 10 shoes, he shoved that up the line and said, I didn't give her money back, so you give me another pair of shoes. So he started pushing quality up the value chain. And so my question to you is, do you think you're just more socially adept and would be good at this? And versus your classmates that you went to 4 years of college with, how many of them could survive in that atmosphere?
I don't know how to answer that. It was difficult for me for the first 2 or 3 years. You know, the office was growing. I was becoming accepted in the community. Things really changed when I married my sweetheart, who I met at Loma Linda, and she came up and started working the front desk.
Was she a Latter-day Saint?
No, she's Seventh-day Adventist.
Or Seventh-day Adventist?
Seventh-day Adventist.
What did I say, Latter-day Saint?
You said Mormon, Latter-day Saint.
Oh, okay, Latter-day Saint.
She's Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventist, yes.
Who's the longest living group of people
Yes.
in America.
Yeah.
Read the book, The Blue Zone. We were talking about that earlier. The Blue Zone is a mathematical deal where they realize in epidemiology, 10 zones have 10x the number of people living to be 100. So this isn't a diet fad or anything crazy like that. And the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventist will put that on, but that's okay. So you married a California hippie
She
and moved to this little Alaskan island?
She's Filipina, moved to the U.S. with her family when she was about 5 months old, grew up in Virginia, but she was
Philippine, Virginia,
Loma Linda,
and to Alaska.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. But she was extremely adept at remembering everybody's name, who they're related to, being very gregarious, and our office, our production numbers doubled that year. And it was all because of her and her ability to simply have a much better relationship and connection with the people of the community than I was able to do at that time. Now I think I'm much better at it, but I'm also much smarter. I hire people to fill the voids that I'm not able to fill. So I want to work on teeth, but all the social stuff and the niceties, I make sure I hire folks that I want to spend my day around and that are teachable, because none of them know how to be a dental assistant or know how to answer a phone. I have to train that, but I have to be able to like them, and I want to spend my time around them. They have to be teachable, and they have to be, good with the community. They have to be moms. They're in with a mommy set. And it just makes things so much easier for the social aspect of these small towns. Everybody is related to everybody. You're talking families that have been here, if they're native, thousands of years, if they're commercial fishing, logging, 2-3 generations. They've intermarried, and if you piss a patient off, you usually just lost at least 5 patients, minimum. Probably a lot more. And when you have 3,500 people, you can't do that too many times. You gotta be, so that type of thing, taking care of little teeny problems before they become noticeable to the patient is extremely important. We care calls. Dentists just, by and large, don't do them. They are absolutely necessary. If you're a dentist and you're out there and you're not doing we care calls, you or your staff member, just do it.
Does it matter if it's a dentist or the assistant or the gregarious Filipino receptionist?
It depends. If it's wisdom teeth, anything major, I will try and make the call.
Okay.
We always have the staff a week later call as well. So the plan is they get contacted, say, a day later, and then a week or so after that. So they're usually surprised and really happy the first time because it's kind of unexpected. The second time, there's been enough time for, it hurts when I bite down, it's still throbbing, whatever. And then they're really appreciative because, there's 2 flavors of ice cream. There's 2 dental offices on this island. There's myself and then there's a Native Health. And I need to make sure that, because I can't charge free, okay, I have to charge money, I have to make sure that in every imaginable context that when there's a comparison, that we are superior, that we're better, we're friendlier, we answer the phone faster, you can get in sooner, there's more compassion, there's more care, there's the appearance of more competency, all of the dentists that work there are fine. We do everything we can to try and shine a little bit brighter than the competition. And making sure that you're taking care of little problems so they don't become big problems is absolutely crucial when you're on an island. Because you don't lose just one person, you lose the whole family.
And it's the same thing in some of the areas in America, like if you're in an Amish town.
Sure.
I mean, when we talk about these people, I mean, like they only say a dozen Native American Indians crossed from Russia into the United States. So their average need was 12 people. And these Amish people, I mean, when they left Germany, I mean, you piss off one Amish guy. I mean, so that is amazing. So when somebody, or their behavior, Warren Buffett always talks about, takes your whole life to build your reputation. In 5 minutes they'll throw it away. I mean, look at Anthony Weiner. I always think that one's the funniest one because if they would have never invented Twitter, he'd be the mayor of New York.
Oh, yeah.
And he's sitting in prison today, not only for tweeting pictures of himself, but, I mean, just to random people. I mean, he didn't even know. I mean, it wasn't like I was sending you a dirty joke. It'd be like sending someone a dirty joke. You don't even know where it went. It just went off into, people are freaking crazy.
Yeah, that was very self-destructive, terrible story.
I mean, so do you think there's behaviors that dentists do in the lower 48 that if you did, you could destroy your practice?
Absolutely, the stereotype. So I went from dental school to running my own show. So I've never worked for anybody else. I've always spent, Dave Albertson, super diver in Ketchikan. I've been in his dental office. I've been in a few other dental offices, but not enough to where I have the look and feel. I have an idea. But I think if I were to try, pinch the ass of a dental assistant, ask out patients, cuss and bitch out an employee, and throw crap. If I did that type of thing, and I hear about that from people, so not all the time, but you hear stories, so I kind of get the impression that kind of stuff happens. People would be leaving me in droves because I just pinched the ass of their cousin. Okay, I just asked out their married mom, whatever. So there's definitely things that if you did in Phoenix, people wouldn't hear about it. Everybody hears about it.
And that's my point succinctly, that when you look at these great companies like Walmart that started in town at 5,000, they, from the very beginning, they put in these policies that made them the companies they are today. And when you go to dentists in like LA and Phoenix and Houston, Chicago, the big cities, they have really horrible practices, but they have a marketing machine. Because if they can get in 40, 50 new patients a month, they can piss them all off. Because if you pissed off 50 people a month in Phoenix, well, you could do that till the end of time and you'd still have new patients. But when you go down to an island of 3,000, you can't piss off one person a month.
No, and
two people a month.
And there's some people.
So they just have better policies.
Yes.
And that's why marketing is a bad drug, because, I mean, it's even in your lingo. You talk about the new patient experience. What do you mean the new patient experience? I did the math on it. The average dentist in his lifetime, 11 out of 12 patients left. So, I mean, the math is here.
What about the old patient experience? That's what they should be focusing on.
Yeah, how about every patient has a good experience? Let me just see if I can pull up my. But anyway, but continue.
Well, so we were talking about trying to keep patients from being upset. There are some people. I make mistakes. My staff makes mistakes. Some people are legitimately upset. So you do everything you can to to smooth things over. Generally, that means calling them up, knocking on their door, having them come into the office, having a need-to-need conversation, and looking them in the eye and saying, I'm sorry. If you do that, that goes so far. I mean, you will get patients that, where they know that you did something wrong, that things didn't work out for whatever reason. And if you just own it and you say, this outcome wasn't my intention, it wasn't what we were striving for, it still happened, I'm very sorry, what can I do to make it right? That phrase right there will get you out of a lot of trouble. And it wins you points, because you're not hiding, you're not going down the other aisle in the grocery store to avoid them. It's important.
This was actually a text I just, or it was a reply to you. Let me see if I can find it. But the bottom line is, I'll just say, God, I can't believe we went over an hour. If your hygienist works 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 hours a year. So she can only see 1,000 people twice a year. Well, if you get 25 new patients a month, what's 25? What's 25? Let's say 1,000 divided by 25. That means every 40 months, divide that by 12. That means every 3 to 30 years, you'd have another hygienist. So you go look at that boy, he started his office when he's 25, now he's 65. You gave him 25 new patients a month his whole life. So he should have added another hygienist every 3.5 years, and 40 years later, he has one hygienist, and he say, what do you need? I need new patients. Well, you can do that business model in LA. You can do it in Phoenix, but you can't do it on an island.
No.
And what I love most about you boys is you have to walk the talk, because if you went out there and got drunk fishing and fell off your boat and was found with a mermaid, how long would it take the whole town to find out?
Half a day.
Half a day.
If that.
So it's so cool. So when you, and here's something that in every major metro, this is what they'll tell you while they're drinking beer with you at a bar. They'll say, you go to Scottsdale and you go to Beverly Hills, and all the famous dentists you read about, they don't do good work. They just do really good marketing. You know where you'll find the best cosmetic dentistry? Glendale, Chandler, Phoenix. And but see, when you're the best cosmetic surgeon in Scottsdale, you could have a botched tummy tuck or a boob job every week, once a month, until the lawyers come and take your license away or whatever. But man, when you're but as this town gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, everything becomes transparent. And in Phoenix, Arizona, I'd rather have a root canal, I'd rather have any dentist done in middle class Glendale or Chandler than in North Scottsdale, where the main focus is building $1 million Taj Mahal, all the movies, all the billboards, all the advertising, and the top journals. And while they're doing all of that, does that make their product lower cost?
Not at all.
It makes their product twice expensive, and that's the quandary in America. So many rich people are paying twice as much money for high-end cosmetic, boob jobs, tummy tucks, veneers, all that kind of stuff like that, and they're paying twice as much for half the quality. I tell people, if you're in Scottsdale, go to Chandler to get your fancy dentistry done. If you're in Beverly Hills and want to save some money, go to Loma Linda or Redlands. I bet there's better dentists in Redlands than in Beverly Hills.
There are some excellent dentists in Redlands.
Yeah, they're just conservative.
Yeah, but I'd like to say something. You mentioned the Taj Mahal practice. And I get these Burkhardt and Patterson magazines that usually have some, I'll say, poor schmuck that went in $2 million in debt building this beautiful, enviable practice. That's a huge amount of risk that I think they're taking. The amount of debt, that's something that I'm sure a certain percentage it works for them. I would love to find out how many of the people on the covers of those magazines 5-10 years later, where they are financially.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea?
Well, I mean, the last financial crisis was 10 years ago, so that was scary because they're usually about every 10 years.
Sure.
And it was 10 years ago. It was 2009, Lehman's Day. We lost about 85 practices to bankruptcy in the valley here, and half of them were exactly what you're talking about. High-end Taj Mahals and
They
stuff.
overbuilt and they
Had $1
yeah.
million, $2 million
Yeah.
deals.
It's self-induced financial tragedy is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think debt, if you're a young dentist, fresh out of school, invest in yourself, root canals, endo, or root canals, implants, and probably third molars, surgical extractions. That is, if you're going to go into debt, learning those. I think the big fancy office is unnecessary. I think that debt can really, it's a double-edged sword. It can leverage you into a very good position, but it can leverage you into a hole.
See, I have totally different advice than you. My advice that when you're in dental school, just marry the Asian chick. She'll come out and say, all she'll do is work like 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. You know how many boys I know that look like me that married the Asian chick in their dental office? And now she does like $600,000 a year in dentistry and takes home $250 while they're basically losers on a golf course
But they're winning.
Oh my God,
I married an Asian chick. She was the occupational therapist, but
yeah.
I'm smiling.
Maybe because you can lose the money in the $1 million Taj Mahal, but you can lose it in the $1 million divorce.
Yeah.
And what a lot of these dentists don't calculate is when you marry some girl who's looking for a rich dentist or whatever, and they spend $10,000, I mean, have you ever done the math on this? $10,000 a month times 12 months, that's $120,000 a year, times age 25 to 65, times 40 years, she costs you $5 million.
Oh no, she cost you a lot more than that.
Oh my God, if you would have married the Asian chick in your dental school class, she would have made you $5 million. That's a $10 million spread. When you're on a date and they bring the bill, if she doesn't make an effort to pay that bill, and she doesn't even get your hand and get the bill, just run. Because when she expects you to pay the bill, that's a $10 million differential between I destroyed $5 million in capital, $10,000 a month for 40 years, versus I made $10,000 a month for 40 years.
But you're not, in your equation there, you didn't include the cost of capital. So, she spent $10 million or $10,000 a month, you could have invested that.
Yeah, Warren Buffett style.
You lost a hell of a lot more than $5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's, if you're a young dentist, just be careful with
And
that.
the reason I keep saying that is because the bottom line is it's hard to get into dental school, medical school, or law school. And so those guys always get predatory trapped by girls sitting there thinking, oh, did you say you're a lawyer? All I gotta do, I just found my meal ticket.
A doctor.
And the lawyers and the dentists and physicians fall for that more than the plumbers and the electricians and the sheetrock workers and the welders.
Yep.
Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Well, hey, I'm a big fan of your posts on Dental Town. I mean, you posted 500 times. I feel like I know you as a brother. I can't believe you were nice enough to come by, talk
I really
shop.
enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. I just want to say for the last 17 years, I've gotten so much out of Dental Town. Dental Town, I think the tagline is, no dentist has to practice alone. When you're on an island in the middle of nowhere, you're pretty much practicing alone. And it opened my world to be able to talk to other dentists. I just started doing a lot of posterior composites. I'm having post-operative sensitivity. What am I doing wrong? And you're having guys that have been doing it that are giving you real-world advice that works.
What body aids are you using?
Right now, I'm using VivaPen, which is.
See, I think most people that had post-operative sensitivity solved it with Clearfield SC.
I used Clearfield SE for probably 10 years.
And you're getting posterior?
No. I went to Clearfield SE. The post-op problems went away.
Yeah.
But the issue I have with Clearfield SE is it has a thick film thickness. And I like using something that I can use for composites and veneers, and something that's kind of universal. And the VivaPen product works very well. It's a single product. It's not a two-bottle.
Ultradent?
No, it's not Ultradent. I think it's Kerr.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's a Kerr product. My assistant would know. She orders it.
Well, you know what I recommend for the bleaching, bonding, and veneer cases and all those things.
What?
Just dimming the lights.
Works great.
I don't need a face for a tummy tuck. I just turn out the lights. You know who's in the room. And
You look great now.
you just gotta sound like Brad Pitt. You don't have to look like him. And but I gotta tell you one final story. I hope this doesn't ruin your trip over here. I gotta tell you my other island dentist story.
Go for it.
I was lecturing in London, and this dentist came. They have a lot of islands out there.
Uh-huh.
And this dentist came, and he was the island dentist. He was the only dentist. And over the years, the NHS pulled out, so yours could get defunded one day and be gone.
Yep.
Anyway, long story short, he finally was ready to retire into his office cell. Couldn't sell his practice. Nobody died. Finally, he realized, I'm not going to sell it, but I'm retiring. So he shut down his dental office. Every day, some people were knocking on his door, and he was walking back to his office, firing the thing up. So when I met him, so he retired, he tried to sell at 65, I think closed it up at 68. I think when I had dinner with him, he was like almost 80. And what he loved the most about Dental Town is free classified ads. I think it's the most overlooked thing on Dental Town. I mean, there's like $40 million worth of free stuff. I mean, why would you buy a laser for $100,000 if you could buy it used for $30,000? Why would you buy a dental practice to a broker who's going to take 6% and tries to get the maximum price when here's some hillbilly guy who'll sell to you? And when the owner carries, he's got skin in the game. Like if I bought your practice, again, if I bought a practice in Scottsdale and it was financed by a $1 billion bank, you know they're all the same players, and you gave me money and ran. I mean, I'm in Phoenix, I'll make it. But man, if I bought your practice on an island, and then you outside finance it, you took my $750,000 and went and told everybody on the island I was an idiot, man, you're in trouble. And those small towns, I want the owner to carry. Now the owner says, I want half down. Well, then have the bank, have the big $1 billion banks who are greedy and want the whole loan, tell them to take half. But I want the seller to take skin in the game. And when you're in a small town, the owner's got skin in the game, and then you call him up and say, God, I just worked on Paul, and he's madder than hell. He's like, I'll call Paul. I'll see him tomorrow at the store. I'll see him Sunday.
I know Paul. I've known him for 20 years.
Yeah.
Talk to Paul.
And then you got a patient say it's sensitivity or something, and the patient's lost faith in you. I'm in a group practice. People lose faith in what I did for 30 years, and I'll say, well, you know what? I'll have my buddy redo it for free. Or in office, or you go down the street, and my best friend, who's the dentist down the street, I'll pay him to do it. They don't know it'll be a Jameson whiskey bottle for it'll be paid for. But so the bottom line is it's the dentist always wants he thinks the secret to success is algebra, calculus, and it's always the people skills.
Absolutely.
It's like my book. There's only 3 things: people, time, and money. And people's 80% of the bus. And if you get an A on the people skills, you can literally screw up almost everything else in life and still make it fine.
And if you have trouble with people skills, hire those who don't. Hire those who are black belts at the people skills.
Yeah, but the dentist grew up in the library, so he hires a bunch of
People like them, yes.
And they always hire weak people. They always like you see the books coming out about we always worship these CEOs like Steve Jobs or now it's Elon Musk, who are just complete assholes. And but you worship them because they're getting the job done. They're making the iPhone. Yeah, they're Steve Jobs gave you the iPhone.
Yes, he did.
Horrible father. I wouldn't want to be his boyfriend.
Right.
But anyway, the dentists like to hire weak introvert people who won't call them on their shit. And the dentists who hire, if you don't have anyone on your team that can say no, that we're not doing that, then you shot yourself. So if you're an introvert, librarian, geek, hire the gorgeous, extrovert, Filipino, gregarious woman who knows everybody's name. But if you have a team that can't feel safe communicating with you, you've lost.
I think hiring people that are strong personalities, sometimes it's difficult because I'm more introverted. I'm the introverted geek, but we have a number of opinionated, strong-minded women that are working at the office which is very helpful. It makes staff meetings kind of difficult because most of our staff meetings turn in to the staff telling me how I'm screwing up somewhere. Okay, but it has been a real benefit to have people that are willing to tell me no. They're willing to say, this policy right there, it sucks, and this is why. And it's pissing people off, or you're going to lose staff members. And instead of having them just say, yeah, yes, doctor, or whatever you say.
Final word is, you know, one of the most proudest things I have in my company, I've got so many people that have been with me 20 years. But they're not going to be with you 20 years if they don't feel safe.
Right.
And they don't feel safe, if they don't feel like they can call you on your own shit, then you're never going to get good advice. And the best one for that was Saddam Hussein. These dictators.
Yes, ma'am.
If anybody would have told him, if you invade Kuwait, the Americans are going to come over here and blow the shit out of you in 100 hours.
That guy would
They all told him that they'd win. So he always had misinformation because if you told him anything he didn't want to hear, he killed you. So I call it the Saddam Hussein scenario. I mean, if everybody's going to tell you what you want to hear, your business is going to go nowhere. But final question.
Yeah.
Can I drive my car from my house to your house?
No.
How far can I get to that island?
You could get to Prince Rupert, Canada, which you could then take a ferry to Ketchikan, which is about an 8-hour ferry, and then you'd have to take a 3-hour ferry from Ketchikan to Prince Wales Island, and then you'd have to drive across the island for an hour to get to my town.
Okay, well, I'm going to drive to your house.
Hey, we will fish.
Do you care?
No, please.
I think that
you like
would be-
salmon fishing.
I think, hell yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be the coolest damn vacation in the world. Can I seriously someday
Absolutely.
just come to your house
Oh, yeah.
and go fishing?
Yeah, I would love for you to see Craig.
Okay, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
The other drive, I
Over the
forgot the
summer.
city in Canada straight, but is it Edmonton?
Sure.
Anyway, it's like a...
Calgary? Edmonton,
I-
Calgary. It's in Alberta. It's Edmonton's in the north, and
Yeah.
Calgary's
I think it's Edmonton.
Yeah.
Straight 1,100 miles up. Oh my God, you leave Phoenix, you go around the Grand Canyon, you go up to
Color
Utah's
country.
Canyon, you go up, I mean, my God, it is 1,200 miles of at least 1,000 miles you don't even think you're on Earth. But we're out of time
All right.
already.
Hey, I had a great time.
All right, thank you so much.